I'm Kirsten. I feel like I'm kind of bringing you the news from the street. I am actually making games. I've been making games for 15 years. We have a studio called Silicon Sisters, and we have an expression that we use in the studio all the time. Am I speaking like generally properly in the mic? We have an expression we use all the time. The early bird may get the worm, but the second mouse gets the cheese. And my optimistic view of the video game industry right now is that the early bird was essentially these guys. You know, they loved the hardware, they loved the toys. They spent the first 30, 35 years of the industry making games for themselves. But it's changing, and I think of us as the second mouse. God damn it, we're going to get the cheese. So the entire time that these guys were making games for themselves, you know, we had this ongoing lament. If only more girls would come into the industry and make the kinds of games that girls wanted to play, then more girls would play those games, and then more girls would come into the industry and make games that more girls wanted to play. The reason that really mattered is two things. One, and this answers one of the questions in the earlier panel, in my view. One thing is that games are a gateway to basic computational skills. If we're not letting our daughters play games, they're not having the familiarity that they need for virtually any job in the workforce coming up. So yes, absolutely entry-level computational skills. And the second one is, of course, that, you know, video games are creative and they tell our story. And if women's voices aren't being heard there, then we're missing part of building that cultural fabric. But what really happened is that technology started to shift. You know, about 5 years ago, and I guess I could say that the Wii started it because at least they got rid of the barrier to entry, which was the, you know, controllers. But, you know, apart from that, Nintendo didn't actually do much for us. But the technology shift was really that broadband penetration, particularly in North America, became ubiquitous. And digital distribution, finally, we were able to download decent-sized games. So we did not need to go to the store anymore and buy CD-ROMs. Girls didn't go to the stores and buy CD-ROMs. And our predecessors, companies like Purple Moon, who did fabulous work, failed eventually because girls would not take their $50 and go to the store. You know, broad generalization, but it was a crippling problem. So that technology shift created a platform shift. So suddenly, it's not a console world anymore. You don't have to go out and buy an Xbox 360 or a PS3. We're walking around with gaming devices in our pockets. Tablets are going to be huge for women. The PC, you know, web-based games become absolutely huge, and that in turn creates a demographic shift. So everything goes mainstream, and it goes away from just strictly the core. So now, a snapshot of, say, you know, 2010 to 2011, now the numbers look like this. You know, 40% of game players are women. 55% of those women are playing online. Women spend, you know, again, it was mentioned earlier, 85%, 90% of all consumer dollars are spent by women. The old argument was, oh yeah, no, everyone's nervous putting their credit card on the net. Not anymore. Women comprise, 65% of all virtual goods purchased. So absolutely a force of women now playing games. So into that, you know, screwed but growing industry comes Silicon Sisters. We're veteran game developers. I've been making games for 15 years. We started a company that, you know, got airlifted out of the corporate world, basically, formed a partnership together, put our own skin on the table, and started to make games that were at least foundational in terms of what girls wanted to play. So when I think of the 30-year-old male industry, I basically, you know, in a really simplistic form, think of everyone finally coming to the conclusion that shooters were the killer app, and, you know, making these incredibly high performance, beautifully, you know, graphically beautiful, you know, lag-free online experiences of targeting stuff and blowing it up. And that became, you know, that's really the visceral experience that the majority of guys absolutely love in video games. What is that experience for girls? What is the first-person shooter for girls? That's what we want to find out. So the first thing we did was build School 26, and School 26 is a game of social mastery. It's a teen and tween game. It takes place in high school, and it's a game of, this is going to sound weird, but I'll talk about it a bit more later on. We wanted to attach a mechanic to empathy. So yeah, again, when we talk about a mechanic like shooting being very coarse, I mean, it's really not tough to build that in programmatically in a game to, you know, shoot something, blow it up. for girls, the stuff that we are good at and the thing that teenage girls spend their time doing, we wanted to hit them where they live. And the stuff they spend their time doing is social engineering and social networking and social intelligence and all that kind of stuff. And how do you turn those subtleties into a mechanic? How do you turn it into something that girls can actually play? How does persuasion become a mechanic? That is not coarse in the same way that that shooting is. So the second thing we did with School 26 was we made it free to play. And this is, you need to pay attention to this. So when I said it was screwed but growing and that it was chaotic to some extent, free to play made the difference in terms of what the business model that everyone was using. And Steve Jobs did not change his mind very often, but he changed his mind on this one. So when Apple introduced the system of in-app purchases, so that when you're playing a game, you can spend more money while you're inside the game. Initially, they decided that only games that you had paid for, only paid apps, could take advantage of the system of in-app purchases. Subsequent to that, Steve changed his mind and said, no, you know what? Free games can also have in-app purchases. Boom. Within 24 hours, multiple games were up there. They were free. You were then paying for more stuff inside the game. That created a revolution in accessibility in terms of breaking down barriers for girls to have those kinds of, for everyone in the world to have games that they could taste test and that they could try for free. That was an enormous boon. So this is 65%, even this year, 65% of the top 100 grossing games on the App Store are of the free-to-play model. And the second thing we did is put, integrate a system of statistical analysis in the game. And this is one of the secrets to success of free-to-play games, is that whenever you're playing our game and whenever you're Wi-Fi enabled or playing it on the internet, we're collecting a whole bunch of data from you guys. So we now know where you're dropping out, where problems are occurring, what kinds of opportunities we have in the game, where you're paying for stuff, what flow you're taking through the game, et cetera, et cetera. So, in the old days, I can't tell you how many times I sat on the other side of one-way mirrors, watching focus tests, trying to get people to articulate what they liked and they didn't like in a game. Now we have this incredible boon, which is just collecting all these reams of data and figuring it out from there. So our voices are being heard, but in a different way, frankly, than we expected. And the voices that we're hearing, this is interesting. So this is the number of downloads. This is, just a random sample. I think I took it from about a month ago. A random sample of the number of downloads that School 26, our game, has had on the Android market, with 41% being our highest market, and that's the United States. 27.8%. So I'm just going to throw it out there. Guess what country this is? It's a wealthy country. It's an educated country. It's a country where the female population is, carefully chaperoned. So our game content, of course, looks wholesome and is not questioned. So 27.8% of our Android downloads are in this game. Anyone? Or in this country? Close. Saudi Arabia. The next one down is 5%, so that's Turkey. And then the 26.2% is just this is our top 10 game markets. And so the next one, the 26%, is the remaining 7 in order, which are something like Malaysia, United Arab Emirates, Australia, Canada, Thailand, Singapore, and something else that I'm missing. Did I say the UK? Yeah, the UK is in there. So that is, I can tell you, in the console industry, there would never have been a conversation about Malaysia. There would never have been a conversation about Saudi. The stuff just didn't happen. This is worldwide, global reach now. So sort of aside, this is not what I want to talk about with this slide, but this is the mechanic that we came up with for empathy. So, and I don't know if anyone remembers Parappa the Rappa, but it's kind of based off that, a call and response mechanic where your high school friends bring you endless problems and dilemmas that they have in school, and you are not allowed to speak. You're only allowed to choose the facial expression that you feel depicts empathy or helps them solve their problems so that they can move through the game. So that's an example of in a simple and low budget game, building empathy into the game. But what I really want to say for my final slide is that a lot of barriers have been broken down. That's what I wanted to get across, that accessibility, familiarity. Under 12 years of age now, we're seeing boys and girls having equal familiarity and access to PCs. It's a level playing field in a whole bunch of ways. For us, the remaining and the biggest barrier is capitalization. We are undercapitalized. We don't look like Silicon Valley. We don't present that way. Venture capitalists understand that the female population is probably the most lucrative opportunity right now in video games, but they still don't get that we're the solution to it. They still think that, guys could probably do a fantastic job of it, and that would all work out fine. So it's a bit of a different, it's not if girls could only make games that other girls would play. It's if girls could only get the money to make the games that we know need to be made, because we don't want to spend 30 years figuring out like the most genius first-person shooter, right? We want to short circuit that. And you need to get a lot of product out on the street and get a lot of people's voices talking to you before you know what you need to make. And that's me. And so now I would like to introduce Nick Taylor. He is the postdoctoral researcher at York University and an absolute rock star. And Nick said the last time he was on this stage, he was belting out karaoke at 3 a.m, but he's not going to do that this time.